Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Hello, hello, Dan. Nice to see you.
Oh,
I miss you. It's been a minute.
yeah. You have, I have written a couple of books since then, and
Oh, is that all?
it looks like I might be 5 books this year. Yeah,
Holy
yeah,
smokes.
yeah. I went
I'm
to,
gonna have to get advice from you. I've been trying to sit down and gather my thoughts and get the
oh,
discipline, and it's
well,
just
I don't believe in discipline. I believe in systems and rituals.
okay.
I floss my teeth because I
Yes.
leave floss sticks in my car. You have to have, for example, one thing I do that I think really helps me personally. I don't eat until I've got my walk, my workout, and my writing in. So,
Hmm.
if I don't do it, I don't eat. And so if I'm sitting around watching a movie with you and say I'm hungry, well, the rule is until it's done. So that helps me. And then the other thing is I've also noticed is that uh, when I look over materials now, it's just easier for me. The other thing that if you don't mind me talking about it is
I
that
would love it.
so these new books now are workshops. These are workshops I've given multiple times. So when I start to write them, I've already got, you know, very long PowerPoint presentations that I can just look at a slide and tell the story. And then, I added this, tell the story. So it's pretty easy. So, but let's get on to my favorite book. In fact, today, let's see what you can see. I've got a Sword in the Stone poster there. I've got original artwork from our book. I've got the graphic novel from Disney, which is terrible. And then I got this one from my youth. The little golden book. And behind all that is the Book of Merlin, which will tie in today as we talk. Okay.
Ooh, I love this. Yes, absolutely. I have
So,
my book as well as the iPad, which is the same version as the book, but I made highlights in that. I guess I'm just one of those, I have a bunch of sticky notes in here, but I don't want
sure.
to write in my book. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
But then I'll highlight in my iPad.
This particular copy was given to me by my sister, so I don't write in this one. In fact, my travel copy,
Is
uh,
with your travel things as you've been traveling.
my travel copy. Oh, here it is, right here. So the travel copy is up here.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so that, and
That's a
then
nice, yeah, that's a nice travel because these hardcover ones too is just so
yeah,
it takes up
it's
so much real estate and it's
when I was
heavy.
young, they were called pocket books because you put them
Right.
in your pocket. And then that's funny because I got that from you, my coffee
Yes.
mug, let go. There's my coffee mug with Merlin, and I don't remember. I think I got that maybe at McDonald's or something. But so today, what's cool about this, especially the version for our listeners, once again, we get that issue of there's a 1938 version from England, and that's the one we have. There's a
Hmm.
1939 American version, which has a softened, the last story went through, really, it just softened the story because the version we read was pretty violent. And then there's that really poor version, I think, the 1958, the Once and Future King compilation without the Book of Merlin, which was a mistake, I think. And what you get in the 1958 version, the most commonly read version here, at least around people I know, is they pull out a whole bunch of the transformation stories and insert the goose and the ant story from the Book of Merlin. And the problem is what makes the Book of Merlin so, and I tell people this all the time, read this version that we both have and then read the Book of Merlin. And the middle part, which is, the movie and Broadway play Camelot, you probably already know the story. Don't worry about it. And what's nice is Merlin comes back and he transforms Arthur 2 more times in the Book of Merlin, ant and goose, and it makes a beautiful circle. It circles where what they did, the way they finished it, it's just open ended and it's not a strong finish. But the nice thing is that And the other thing is, I'm glad you asked me because this story, the story of the snake or T Natrix, I sometimes confuse with a story that comes up. So we're going to have the winter hunt, and then the story after is that Archimedes, the owl, and Arthur go out and meet Athena, and we have more stories. We have the story of the stones and the story of the trees. Now, why I say that is that in my mind, I often mentally put the stone story into the snake. And I also think, and I think one of the most beautiful, I think there's about three or four exquisite lines from The Sword and the Stone. Of course, the one that gave me Never Let Go, uh, the So Soon line, where it's
Mm.
the last time Merlin will ever meet Arthur. It was also the first time. And then the line we get out of this particular story, there is nothing sad except history, which I have a master's degree in history. And of course, I spent much of my career teaching various histories. And there is nothing sad except history was always in my first handouts as a professor or a high school teacher. I had a list of 10 things. Uh, the twin towers of history are chronology and geography. If you don't know both, you don't know either. Um, Nothing is sad except history. And the famous, when the one I think I got to say, look, when I say this, your generation, and look how I did that. You people.
You people.
Uh, Dennis Stanley's famous line, which I try to get my students to memorize: never judge people in the past by the standards of today. And it drives me crazy. Someone will start. It happened the other day. We were talking about a movie that I thought was fabulous, and the star of the movie has been canceled. My thought was, it's still a marvelous film. It's still worth your time. We talked about it, and it's like I'm a big believer that you have to separate often people from their horror. Everyone you know is horrible. Okay, we're all horrible. We're all human persons. And sometimes you do dumb things, I mean, so
Well,
there
you
you
always
go.
said, you taught me, I'm a great person that does terrible things, and I'm a terrible person that have done really great things and, or good things, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
we have to kind of see that. But I agree. And I actually used your quote I mean, because you wrote it down somewhere and I copied it from somewhere, and it's like there was a credit to it. But I used it actually at the beginning of an audiobook reading I did of my father's book, which is really
Yeah,
just a compilation of lectures
sure.
from the late 60s, early 70s. So he uses all these terms, which, like you said, in this quote unquote day and age, kind of are cringeworthy or is outdated and everything. So I said that kind of at the beginning of the audiobook because I had the ability to kind of make sure I had a little bit of a forward and talked about
Yeah,
it. And I was like, but I'm going to read it as is because these are the lecture notes and I'm just reading it verbatim. You have to be able to also put yourself in that time period. It actually
yeah,
allows you to be in this period piece, right? You get to kind of see the evolution of us as humans
yeah,
and how we continue to learn through education. But I think it's silly to also like try to change a history because that's
yeah.
how we learn. Um,
I think Huck Finn is a better book in 2025 than when it came out because there's a word that gets used over and over and over.
mhm.
And in 1920 in the South, that word had no impact. In 2025, if I go in a high school classroom and read Huck Finn, I'm going to get parents, I'm going to have students
Yeah.
get up and leave, and I'll be saying, why are you censoring this? Because people in my family are willing to die over everyone's rights. And when you got to hear words that are hurtful, you
Yeah.
have to hear, because, I was told as a child that sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And these are words, and I'm willing to go to war over the people that the words are talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you
100%.
got to be able to say the word. So let's get started. What do you want to hear from me? What do you say?
So many things. Actually, what you're talking about, I'm like, keep going.
So there's a
You're
couple.
it's not your fault. Everything you say is so masterful and I can learn. I always tell people I'm like I'm in the longest book club I've ever been in. I'm taking my time with The Sword and the Stone on my whatever number reread, and I always feel like I'm a bad student if I didn't get to really read the chapter again before we meet. And of
Yeah.
course, today that's one case, but I luckily I have your cheat sheet, and then
Yeah.
I'm grateful I've read it enough to where it kind of resonates. But
Yeah.
no, every time I get a chance to talk to you, people are like, "It sounds like you're in school." I'm like, a little bit. I mean, I'm getting an education. So
Medication.
so that's that. But it's been really fascinating because I feel like it also matters when you and I speak. Like maybe had we spoke last year about chapter 13, we would be saying different things than we are now. So
Oh,
and it's so fascinating to me how
yeah.
book clubs can be that way as you go chapter by chapter. It also depends on like what's happening in my life right now, on like what direction I take with this, what mood I'm in, you know.
You make, yeah, there, yeah. You make a strong argument, and I do agree with it. And it's like there's an old phrase. I think it's Native American, but every time you put your foot in the river, it's a different river. And I feel that way about great literature. Uh, every time, because you bring so much of yourself. For example, when I first read this book, I was young King Arthur. Well, now I'm Merlin. Same book, different guy. When I said this the other day, how much easier my financial planning would be if I knew exactly when I was going to die. It would be really easy for me to nail it. When I think about, so soon, I think, today is my grandson Danny's first day in junior high.
Wow.
Now, part of me said, so soon, And every single day as he marches towards adulthood, I'm sure he can't wait to drive, and I'm sure he can't wait to drink and go away to college and get away from, you know, and and I look and I'm like, well, I'm one day closer to not being here anymore. And I think you're right about that with books. And I think that what makes a great book great is that when you come back into it, you've changed, and I like that. A couple things about this the particular chapter is it was only when I went through in serious go through, and as you have my notes, yeah, like for example, when Teenatrix has to keep summarizing everything. Oh, so it's Homo sapiens, male, and then he says a word which I always thought was barbarian, but actually it's the root is barber.
Yeah, I had to look all of these up.
He's bearded. He's a
Yeah.
bearded male human. And
Yeah.
then the other one was the word, and I've heard this word my entire life, a reticulating python. And I always thought it meant something to do with squeezing, but actually, reticulation is the diamond, this little beautiful diamond
Mm-hmm.
pattern. So a reticulating rug isn't one that's going to squeeze you to death. It's the pattern. And you read something like that, and then you realize just how often in life do you hear a word and you assume you know what it means, and when you find it, I was telling someone yesterday that originally awesome and awful meant the exact same thing.
Mm.
And if you called someone nice historically, nice basically meant someone who's missing a few marbles, somebody who's as we used to say, touched. Uh, so the word "nice" isn't a compliment in our language record, but
Yeah.
oh, Dan John's a nice man. The correct response I do now is, oh, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah, my vocabulary, I find some days I'm doing well, and other days I'm like, have I regressed? I don't know what any of this means. And of course, in this particular chapter, there's so many like science, genus like of different species words, and I'm like, what is this? Oh no, this is the frog species or the
Oh,
lizard species, and you're like kind of learning about. I'm like, I remember this from 30 years ago
yeah.
some sort of class where you learned about this and didn't really pay attention. And of course there's dinosaur references, I think, too. And so this one also is kind of challenging
And
in
then,
a sense of like, do
well,
I want to look everything up? But I have now, luckily I love the iPad thing because I can just hover and
oh,
cheat. It makes it
oh, okay.
nice because it can just look it up for me.
So the dinosaur thing, this is where I got confused in my, before I is the dinosaur story, and later when we get to Athena's story of stones, they both they there is an intersection that I didn't fully appreciate until I got confused. So the so you have the big mama who's pregnant, the mama dinosaur whose specialty was hiding and evasion. And she comes out and she gets killed by St. George, the dragon slayer. She's murdered. She's not a killer, but she's murdered by St. George, the dragon slayer. Later, when we get to the cohere part, the stone story with Athena, the stones are trying to stick together, cohere, cohere. And then the very last moment, somebody takes a flake of a stone, puts it on an arrow, and kills his brother. And so both stories end up with humans kind of being the bad guy, very, very simply.
Against nature, yes.
Well, again, yeah. And it was kind of fun because I suddenly realized that the overlap on those two
Yeah.
stories. And then I thought, just in passing, that there's that strange, I think it's a strange story about the poison. In fact, if you have any insights, let me know. But the poison story relates in a
Into the
sense
tree part?
to the tree, to the
Okay.
so the tree part in the Athena's dreams.
Okay.
The trees talk to each other,
Hmm.
and of course you have the poison trees, and they're not. I mean, whether it's planned or not, or if it just worked out. I just found that kind of an interesting thing as I was, as I was in. The nice thing about confusion is as you pull yourself out of confusion, you tend to remember things a little better. Yeah.
Also, talking it out,
Hmm.
sometimes you kind of find your way there. Um, but in particular, I love the kind of the kickoff of this chapter because he is, T, he's like, oh, what does T stand for? And he's like, well, it ain't Tommy, and it's kind
Yeah.
of like warming us up into this. Oh, we have another teacher here coming through, right? I'm like, maybe it stands for teacher, but,
Yeah.
um,
Well, if you
but,
don't mind, I wouldn't even mind going back even farther
oh
because,
yeah, let's.
you know, when the story starts,
Hmm.
Wart is still healing from the broken collarbone.
Hmm.
So if you turn a person with a broken collarbone into a snake, that one little bone isn't going to have a massive impact on, the miles. I find this charming. I can see if I'm an editor or publisher, if I'm going to pop a chapter out, I would see myself pulling this one out. But it links so well to the upcoming story. So what they did in 1958 is they pulled out Athena and Archimedes. They pulled out this one. Oh gosh, no, they kept Badger and they kept the others, but they pulled these two out and put and I don't know. I like how they stand on their own. Um, the whole thing about dreaming and he has no dreams. And as he falls asleep and it's so hard for Merlin to wake him up. I just think all of that is elegant. At the same time, I also understand why you would pop it out. If I don't agree with it, but I understand it, because neither of these two chapters, this one and Athena, really pushed the story forward. Oh, and they also pulled out the battle with Galapus, the giant, which comes later in the book. But he's referenced earlier, and it's just a funny story because it frees up Pellinor again, and Pellinor, is kind of a character, yeah. Ask questions. Okay, there's
Okay.
my opening.
Well, I think it again, like I feel like it's a fun journey. I don't know who I am. Like you said, when you're young, you're always like, I am Lord. I'm trekking along as the one learning through this. And I still feel like maybe that's the case because I feel like I'm always learning. Maybe I'm maybe I'm the witch in the forest Madam Mim or something. Um but I think it's fun because he starts with like, oh, your education's been neglected because and then he starts to feel sorry for him because he's like, oh, you don't have
Right.
a mom, and then he says legends and
He's
dreams
referring to the snake, everybody
to the
listen.
snake. Yes, the
Yeah.
snake. So the snake is talking to Arthur Wart. And then he asked if anybody taught you the legends and dreams. And of course, I was like, okay. And those are capitalized specifically in the book, which I find interesting. And then I looked at your kind of your notes and kind of how you break that down. But I would love for you to like kind of verbalize a little more about that because then he says, which do you want to learn? And he goes to history, right? Which I guess is more towards the legend side, but like Also that the snake says there's no history in me or you because we're too small for our great sea to care for. And so I'd like to kind of hear you talk a little bit about the legends and dreams because I feel like that's so it just stands out because it's always capitalized and there's so much there.
It's almost like T. natrix, the grass snake, has a formal education.
Mhm.
And so we capitalize those two because it's like capitalizing Econ 101 and History 170.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? You're gonna, the capital HIST 170, it's almost like T. natrix is shocked that he doesn't have this really rudimentary knowledge of things. So, and he's just so, what do you do? What do when you sleep? I don't know. I don't remember anything. And Teen Natrick is just so sad, And and I think and I think what's happening here is that when we consider education, yeah, here in the United States, 2025, we would say an educated person, and you pretty much assume they'd have letters after the name: BS, BA, AA, MS, MA, PhD, MRE, you know, uh, you know, something, But over and over and over again in the book, formal education is experiential with a mentor or a tutor.
Mhm.
And
Like
I
an
think,
apprenticeship.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think in my own career, in the career of the strength coach, I think it's, I mean, I've taught at the university level in strength and conditioning, and I'll get students in there and I'm shocked how at some of them, especially the ones who kind of push back the most or don't even go to class in some cases, they have no experience. They have no, their experience might be a crappy bro science bodybuilder split. But you can't have an athlete do that program. Well, you could, I guess some, but what you need in my fields always, and that's why I think I've been drawn to religious studies, religious education, theology, strength and conditioning, coaching, is because you always have to weave your knowledge through your experience. And you have to experience everything. When I had interns, the rule was, and it wasn't popular, you had to do the work out of the day. So I remember Adrian Craddock, a great guy from Galway, Ireland, vomiting into a garbage can after doing tumbling because he'd never done it before. And, a few weeks later, he didn't vomit anymore. My little point on this is sometimes to really get a good education, you have to vomit into the garbage can. I can, like, I'm sure in like the martial arts world, you know, well, I really know what I'm doing. I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but I read this book, and inside this book, everything you said is wrong because it's inside this book. And by the way, just in case, this is my Sherlock Holmes detective agency book. And I don't know how good, but he does talk about the art of
Yeah,
the,
the defense.
yes. So I looked at this and I now can use a umbrella or a cane to defend
I'd
myself.
actually be impressed if someone came to me and said they read a book now. More than often I saw this on YouTube.
Yeah, I guess if someone said they read it in a book, I actually probably lean in and go, "Thank God,
I
I'll
was like,
work."
really? Tell me with pages or
So, so one of the things that and it is, and
but you're right, experience.
yeah, is that it's real easy to teach you the legends and the stories and the dreams and the curriculum after I talk about it either in this new book or the one I just came out with, the one coming up. But I talk about how very often at schools I've coached, there'll be a little sign. It'll say commitment to excellence, or it'll say, you know, abandon all hope, ye who enter here, or whatever. And the athletes will slap their hand on it,
Mm.
you know, uh, you know, and it'll come back in 20, 30 years after they graduate and they'll put their hand back up on it. I can tell my eighth and ninth grade athletes that, what, 40 years from now, you'll see that sign and you'll put your hand on it, it'll mean the world to you. But they don't yet. I can tell them that, but they can't because they haven't experienced it yet.
Hmm.
And I mentioned at the same time, you can't YouTube yourself into being French Foreign Legion or United States Marine Corps. You have to be immersed.
Yeah.
And I think when people ask me about why I love the Sword and the Stone, um, in the last few years, I think it's because it is the book that is most in love with education I've ever read. Now, it's also true that when he pulls the sword out of the stone, it's a template on how to lift weights. But it's from all the experiences he got from his transformations. His strengths come from his experiences. And it's
Hmm.
not just book learning, which is nothing wrong with it, but you have to have both. So
Yeah.
as we enter this particular story, Teenatrix, his newest tutor, is also as Badger will be Badger. He's a upcoming story. Badger and Teenatrix have the most empathy for Arthur, and of course the fish. There's no empathy there. Archimedes is mad at Arthur most of the time, but in this story, these are people who, I mean, of course, in the Hawk story, he almost gets killed. In this story, we have someone who it just they're motivated by empathy, and it's I think it's a beautiful story. All right, I'm blabbering on.
No,
Sorry.
no, no. I was just gonna ask you because you did and do teach history and like formalized classes and everything. And so, of course, when we think about education, we think about school and being
Mhm.
in the classroom. And as a strength coach, though, it's very more visually like hands-on. What would you say to a student that asks the question of, well, how can I be immersive with history? Like, what is your best recommendation to be immersive in that experience versus just reading a history book or watching a documentary, et cetera, et cetera? Because there are other ways, but I feel like those are hardly ever explored. I certainly was never really in too
Are
many
you ready for this?
classrooms.
We got to go back in time. On Wayback Machine, 1981.
Okay, let me
Uh,
get the DeLorean.
my professor and I were talking, and I can see him. I can see him right now. And we were discussing, and he said, "Do you want to move on and to me and teach at the university level?" I said, I would love to teach, medieval history, but the students who are getting the major would have to take a fencing class, a horseback class, because Utah State, an archery class, a fencing class, and had two or three others. And he leaned in like this and he went, "You'd never get away with that, but that is a brilliant idea."
Yeah.
Because once you've fenced and you've had someone, you know, I don't know, this close to you you know, once you've shot an arrow, once you've ridden a horse, these stories all of a sudden just open up. In fact, I would even say, there might even be I mean, even if you just went to do they still have Renaissance fairs
I
and
was going to ask you about that. Yes, they do. And I was going to
yeah,
say, do you recommend that? Because people kind of make fun of that culture, right? The
yeah,
cosplay, LARP, and Renaissance
yeah,
fair culture. But I was like, actually, it puts you in
yeah,
kind of that time period and you can experience. And they have like when you go to vacation places, like you
yeah,
go to Scotland, right? You go to
yeah,
Edinburgh, and then they've got the little like alleys where you can go and they've got people dressed up and they're in character
right.
of ye old times or whatever, right? So,
So I was, when I go to Ireland, I go to places where some of the most uh, where Auden was from, W.H. Auden, if I'm saying it right.
mm,
And I went to his grave, and then you go to somebody else's grave, and then all of a sudden you're reading a poem, and you're going, "Oh, that is clear. No wonder he was talking about a falcon, coming in because there that in this on this flat part of this hill, and you see the falcons circling. It's more than a poem now. If uh, I uh, it's in the other room, but you know, I've been to Egypt, and I've been to Jerusalem, and I've been to all these places, and that and sadly, the late great Father Eugene Laverdiere, he once said that you can always tell when someone's reading scripture if they've been to the Holy Lands or not. And he said because when they talk about, it's not the Sea of Galilee, it's just a lake. It's they pump it up to a sea, but it's a, trust me, it's a tempest in a teapot, really, first. But once you've been where the Sermon on the Mount has been read and the backdrop, you would read, I mean, you're reading Psalm 23 and you're realizing that that's the loaves and fishes miracle of Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Mhm.
It just shows up in its clarity. You read Mark's miracle of the loaves and fishes, you read Psalm 23, you're standing on the hill, and it's just all the green grass, the phrase lay down in the green grass, boom, boom. They just, well, because you're there, because
Mhm.
you brought the experience in. So when you're teaching your students, your high school students bored to tears about the Battle of Agincourt or the Battle of Crecy, or Crecy, uh, all of a sudden you're if you've taken an archery class and you're mentally launching arrows, it's gonna be a much better lecture than if you just, and so what happened? Well, no, page 62 of your text. So yeah, I very much believe in this. And there's some fields. I mean, could you imagine a chemist or a biology major, never a biology major who's never dissected or studied pond scum? Chemist who's never mixed a couple of compounds and blew some
Mhm.
hair off their eyes? Yeah, I mean, so well, and I feel this way about English majors who don't take this wrong. No, don't write mean things. But if you're an English major and you don't write, or either critically or screenplays or poems, but you got to put it out there. You've got to be part of it. You've there's a style of poetry called, I think it's called a sestina. It's what Dylan Thomas's "Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night." And if I'm
Mhm.
wrong, then I apologize. But until you've tried to write in that very formatted style of a sonnet or a sestina, you don't appreciate how great Thomas or Shakespeare were. So once you do that, then all of a sudden the things leap off the page at you. Yeah.
First of all, I am all about that fencing and jousting and whatever class that you said would have been mandatory because I think that would be so great. I do feel that because I have worked with so many youth that they are better learners when they're moving anyway, that they get movement because they're just sitting in a classroom all day. So that would be awesome. And I wish you could have gotten away with it. That would be amazing.
Well, it was just an
Um,
idea. It was just an idea. And I think it actually, uh, uh, Professor Cole, it was kind of funny because he was like this as I was talking about it. And then I also said that the department needs to have a medieval feast every year.
oh, yeah.
Lots of crappy wine and,
Yeah. Have you been to medieval times? They used to have those little when you use
yeah.
your
And,
hands and they have
yeah,
the
you
knights
use your hands and, or maybe just one knife. And the thing is,
and you say
there's
pass the port.
past the port. That's right. Grummer Grummerson. Good. Yeah. So we're off topic, but yeah.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, well, I was going to ask you because I've always feel very fortunate that my parents were really big on experiential learning. So I got to miss a lot of school to travel
Mm.
and where I could sit in a classroom and learn about all of these countries and XYZ, but having gone there and tasted the food and been in the culture, heard the language, I always try to encourage parents of this day and age, if they have the ability and resources to do so, learning how to take a standardized test is something, but like I just try to advocate for that. But I get a lot of resistance to this experiential learning. And I was curious, I know we're off topic, but like you've been just so many historical places and having such a scholarly background and such depth in both your religious studies as well as your just world studies. Like, do you have kind of not a favorite place, but a place that you I guess just hold in like the highest regard of like I'm so glad I went there and
Yeah.
like
Actually,
big
yes, I do.
check.
Just outside of the just outside of the Dead Sea, there's a place called Engedi, And
Mm.
that's where David wrote, well, that's where David wrote Psalm 23, Engedi. And the water is crystal clear. And you could see why a whole army could live up there. And it was just the most magical place. It is a series of waterfalls in the middle of course, I live in a desert, but the area around the Dead Sea makes our desert look pretty lush, you know. And you got this series of beautiful, and the bulrushes grow over the streams like this. So you can actually take a nature's own water slide down certain parts of it, and you can slide and you're inside these bulrushes. And if you walk 10, 20, 50, 30 feet away and go, you wouldn't even see it. It's just these small, minor little areas, and the waterfalls are just gorgeous. The next place I would probably put the Wild West of Ireland right there. Just basically Sligo, Galway, Clare, all the way up to Donegal. I know those best. Connemara, Mayo, and then it's not historically as important, but Costa Rica. Okay, there you go.
I love it. I love it. Hey, you have to have an escape place too
Yeah,
that you just enjoy. It's okay to just enjoy things. It doesn't all have to be education.
that's right.
Um, so when we're talking kind of about the dream state, I kind of find this interesting too because it's like, okay, we're going to be falling asleep, and in the end of the chapter, Merlin is like, had to, what did he have to do? Scream or something? He had to shout 20 shouts in his high human voice, right, to wake him up for tea. And so this just kind of shows that, like, I always wish I could learn by what they call osmosis, I guess. I'm like, that never really worked for me. I always fell asleep at the library in college and didn't wake up knowing about economics or whatever test I was going to fail in college. So, what are your thoughts on this, the intention of the dream state of learning?
Well, it is funny because there used to be a comic strip called Legion of Superheroes, where they went through that phase where they stopped just doing, they started learning during the days again, instead of sleep learning. The downside of sleep learning, and this is just as from, is if it was possible to just send things in, it'd be unfiltered. And a good education demands the discourse, the give and take. Even if the give and take is, I'm not following, I don't understand this. If you say you don't understand something, that's actually an important part of education. If you took the lowest level math class, ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade at your school, you went off to your university and they made you repeat it for the 4 years of college, it might indicate that a career in the maths, whether that's the accountings or the physics or the whatever, uh, whereas the guy sitting next to you, who's going to end up being a strength coach, gets the best grade in the class because math, especially geometry, is fundamental as a strength coach. And geometry is the foundation. Geometry is the foundation of philosophy. Philosophy is the foundation of theology, and training is based on givens and proofs. So they're all geometry. And if you are crappy at geometry, but you're really good at critical thinking when it comes to reading poetry, go in that direction. Be someone who pulls in information and tries to sift it. So dreaming and learning, the downside of it is you wouldn't have that discourse, that dialogue. And so you probably, how old are you now, Mimi?
47, closer to
Yeah, my best
48.
year, my best year as an athlete was age 47.
Okay, I have
Yeah.
hope.
So, uh,
I'm
you know,
doing John's hip lift routine as often
yeah,
as possible.
at age 47, you probably have a pretty good handle on your strengths and weaknesses. But every so often, you probably still bump into a friend of yours who will say, but you know what? I know you think that's your strength, but you know what you really do best, Mimi? You know what you're great at, Mimi? Have you had that? So you have
Yes.
this resume, I had to send my resume. I'm a sponsor of something here in Utah called Utah Presents. and they want me on the advisory board. And they said, well, would you mind sending us a resume? And I thought, a resume? Who in this day and age uses resume? So I have one, but you have this marvelous
Is it
resume.
like 5 pages?
I asked them if you want all my published work.
I mean,
This,
seriously.
my 26th book just came out, and I have well over 1,000 published articles in
Yeah.
various, you know,
Yes.
well, if you consider newspaper articles. Um, so you look on this big list and all these accolades and how wonderful Mimi is and how wonderful Danny is, and then someone will lean in and you go, you know what your real strength is. And
Oh yeah,
so,
other people definitely know me better. The ones that never met me, especially that write about me
yeah,
online.
and that's why I don't know how popular it still is, but 30 years ago, we used to use this thing called the Johari window a lot,
Mm,
named by a guy named Joe and a guy named Harry, Johari. And it's four little things I know about myself, things I don't know about myself, things
mhm,
other people know about me, things other people don't know about me. And you come around like you have secrets you probably don't share.
mhm,
So that's things you know that people don't know.
mhm.
But at the same time, there's things that we all know about you, but you haven't yet discovered about yourself. And the idea is that you're supposed to work with this Johari window,
Okay.
which brings us back to the idea that I'm trying to get across with the idea of the sleeping snake. And learning is that you're going to get a lot of things you didn't know, but you're not going to be able to bounce it off with the things you already knew and how you can use that set of tools. Like, I used to work with a guy. I didn't really like this, but one of his check that one of his Bible questions, his final was you had to write the entire in order all the books of the Bible, and it's
Mm,
just a memory thing. But the problem is this: you could have someone who knows in order Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and depending it changes from there, but Joshua, Judges. Great, but not have a single understanding of the importance of Genesis chapter 4. And
mhm.
my
Like the
brother,
lessons of the
the
stories.
lessons. You know all this stuff, but you know nothing. Yeah. And so to me, this dream sequence really unpacks, but the thing that White does so beautifully after the story, which I'm been reading this book since 1970 or 71, and I still don't understand what the hell the poison story is all about. Okay. And I understand about St. George in this story, but what happens at the end is he goes back to sleep. And I've always maybe and there's this little while he falls back to sleep, um, what's his name? The guy, the medicine snake, in front of
Um,
Doctor. Yeah. So that's what is it? Asclepius or something like that.
Oh yeah, no, no,
Yeah.
not Ceratosaurus. That was something
He
else.
says, in the great sea, the stars swing over, the eternal whirlpool flows. Rest, rest, wild head, in the old bosom, which neither feels nor knows. She only rocks us, cradled in heaven, the reptile and the rose. Her waters which bore us will receive us. Good night and sweet repose. You got to remember, young Arthur never had a mom. And so the
Mhm,
gift here is he's given, if you want to say Mother Earth as a mom. I just find
mhm.
that to be beautiful. And it was nice rereading this because it reminded me of this. And then, of course, Merlin wakes him up in time for tea.
Of course.
In my notes, I have a poem I wrote in there about in my notes. It was a short, more of an ejaculation poem. That's what they used to be called. My my mother saved me in time to write this poem. It was a fun little poem where it was fun, but that last line, up in time for tea. I just love that little wait.
Hmm.
Such a just such a simple little thing. Yeah.
As we were discussing, or while you were discussing being awake is where you get the Q&A, you get the questions and the answer and bouncing ideas because you've been teaching for so many generations. I'm curious because you have so much more experience than I do, but I often find with students, not just children, adults as well, in this last, let's say, decade to just be rounded, I feel like there's a fear of asking a question because you and I have already established there are stupid questions out there, but I feel like there's such a fear of having the wrong answer, of not knowing. It's like when people like say a joke and you want to pretend you get the joke, but you don't really get the joke. And there's like a fear of actually asking a question or waiting till you. I always say to my students, okay, hey guys, this is a learning environment. So yeah, you know what? I may give you a hard time if you ask a stupid question, but if you ask a question that we can all learn from, we need to hear it. And there's always somebody at the end of class that comes up and is like, okay, so I have a question. And I think it's not about being selfish necessarily, but being so afraid to ask.
Well, you
And I'm
don't
like,
want to
has it
know.
always been this way or is it just worse?
Well, one of my favorite things when I work with special forces guys, I always make the joke. I go, listen, on paper they said to have a Q&A. I know not a single one of you is going to ask a question. However, I'll get to my inbox on my email tonight, and
Yeah.
every single one of you will have asked the question. So I do think it is different now. Now, anybody who's ever taught knows that there are stupid questions. But so you're working with a generation now who's never had to on their bicycle, ride to the library, pull out an encyclopedia, and look up the answer.
Hmm.
In
Yep.
1990, I was just watching an old Siskel and Ebert this morning.
Oh, two thumbs
And
up.
well, every so it's my it's what if I'm by myself and I'm watching and I'm eating a meal by myself, I'll watch. I'll just put it on, because it just makes me happy. And they were talking about the 1991 Oscars, and it's interesting
Okay.
because they don't tell who won. They're just telling about, and I caught myself jumping right towards the internet to find out
Who
who
was in
won
the,
the Oscar.
yeah.
Instead of me thinking back through because I watched the Oscars in 1991, instead of me
Yeah.
thinking back and doing the legwork, I was going to get the right answer. There's a wonderful How I Met Your Mother where they're arguing over what's the most popular fast food in America, cheeseburgers or pizza. And they're screaming at each other. And it says 10 years later, it's cheeseburgers. And so part of the issue, if you will, is that we you're working with a generation who's always had very easy access to any question. And it's getting even easier. Now, one of the problems we found with AI, it's called hallucinations. But
Mhm.
I like to since a lot of people use AI, one of my friends plugged in Dan John workouts with Chat GPT, and they're terrible. Anybody who knows anything about me knows that those aren't would never give those workouts. One had four sets of seven. Well, four and seven are not Fibonacci numbers, and I cannot have a program. It was just funny because it was right there on the forum laughing about my little psychosis
I
with
love it.
Fibonacci numbers. And,
Well, I
and
don't know. Now that this podcast will be out there, it'll crawl and be like, oh, it has to be a Fibonacci number.
yeah.
It'll
So,
learn.
but so, I, I can read something quickly and see fault because I'm trained from my youth to see that there are going to be problems. And problems, by the way, are always okay. But if you decide to turn your paper in for your college project and you just type in, give me a 5-page paper on Winston Churchill, and you don't review it, our little AI friends might make mistakes. Now, the funny thing is, if you knew anything about Winston Churchill, I'm just using that as an example, you probably would instantly pick up on the error.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so we're working with a generation who's that it's easy to find right answers. And one is there are tough decisions we need to make in life, and they're not easy to find. Uh, who are you going to marry? Who are you going to spend time with? Those are tough. You want, I mean, it's easy. Go to AI. Who is Dan John going to marry? In fact, that might be fun right now. Uh, or whatever. You know, even something as simple as, what are you going to be your major? God, it's my favorite thing. I talk about it in a couple of my things. The word decide comes from the same root as murder, suicide, homicide. Okay, it means to cut,
Mm,
scissors.
mhm,
Watching a high school senior have to decide about the next year, I find hilarious, especially kids who've been coddled by their parents, because for the first time in their life, they have to end up with one decision. And it
mhm,
chokes them out because they actually have to decide, they have to cut. So when it comes to marrying somebody, you're deciding. So I'm guessing there's 4.1 billion females on the planet. I have to decide between those 4.1, toss out basically 4.1 billion people and pick, you know, Edna or whatever. That's tough. Deciding is tough. And the best thing we can do for a person's education, I think, is teach them decisions. And it can be just as simple. We're going to do a small group project. Pick who you're going to be. Pick teams of four. The stupid kids pick their friends. The smart kids pick the kids that are smart.
Yes.
Uh, You know, my attorney Paul Burke, uh, he's uh, Utah lawyer of the year a couple of years ago. But when he ran, I think it was for class president, and he just got up there and he said, "I know a lot of you don't like me, but I'll get the job done." It's kind of funny because you could just see the students go like this. This,
Facts.
you want Paul on your small group. You want
Right.
Paul. You want me on your small group. I'm not gonna let this thing fester. I'm gonna finish it in a few days. I know it seems like gentle listeners that we're growing all over the place, but this is a book about education and learning, you know? And this book is found, if you look over there, I think I've shown you that before.
Yes.
That's a painting of the cover of the book, and behind me all the copies, and of course, there's from the artist, and there's some other
Mhm.
work. And in my gym, I have the Sword and the Stone. And this book has always touched me because it's foundationally about learning and education and preparing yourself when it is time to pull the sword out of the stone. You know, are you going to be ready? And
Mhm.
everybody I know has a sword in the stone moment in their
Yes.
life.
Agree. Maybe even more than one. More than likely, if you're
Yeah,
lucky.
there comes a moment in everyone's life where, you either stand up to whatever it is or you lay back down. But, not doing something is just as powerful as doing something. So, all right.
Yeah.
What other questions you have? I'm going to hard stop here.
Yes,
Go
we only have a couple minutes. I don't know if we can get into it right now because I
ahead,
was
ask. See how fast
looking
I
at
can.
well, I was looking at your notes and then you talked about one of the essays and I just because it jumps out at me and we're talking about learning is your fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence and
That's a little,
warrior speak.
why
That's
don't you
like a lot. So maybe we
why don't
can
you,
table that.
can you post it up on your, can you
Yes,
post,
I will post it. Yes. I think I have the link to the
post the
Dan
whole
John
thing.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
post
think
the
I
whole thing.
think I have on previous ones. I'll just keep linking back to it. But I mean essentially it's like um I think with this chapter, I mean we can kind of wrap it all in. It's just that um do you feel there was, other than Merlin, a best teacher for Wart? Because he's learned from so many people's up until this point in the book. Do you feel like one of them was kind of the one that really gave that final lesson, or do you think it's an accumulation? Because kind of jumping off what you said earlier, which is I can just Google the answer, then it's not about the journey, it's just about the destination. And so for like Ward, is it like like just because he had this large teaching panel, Or is it really just the Merlin that's like leading him and exposing him to teachers? It's like my dad's the same way. Like he's my main teacher, but has exposed me to lots of different types of instructors to gain different things from. So just really kind of curious about that aspect of it.
The anti-teacher, the pike,
Mm.
pike in the fish story.
The fish story. Yeah.
All power is the power to grind and gnash and kill because he's the opposite of what Merlin is trying to teach. So the antithesis of all the other teachers is the pike. And so that why I think it's so powerful. And remember, Cully too tries to, grab him, but Cully's mad. Uh, he's in danger a few times, but I think the pike, because the pike is trying to kill him,
Mm.
memorize him, and eat him. And once you've seen how evil humans can be, and for those of you, who are worried about things, don't forget this book is written right at the height of 1930s fascism, and several of the characters are clearly, well, the way they talk is, you know, 1930s fascism. And by the way, as my dad warned me when I was a child, evil never truly goes away. It just changes pants, if you will. Um, you know, even though power is seductive and oppressing the poor is seems like a board game sometimes, it's wrong. And I applaud the Pike for being so clear and his opposite lesson. Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, I know you have a hard stop, so we're gonna pause on the chapter there and pick up next time. As always, Danny, it's so nice to see you, and I always learn so much. I feel just so grateful to be on this journey with you.
We'll talk again soon. Okay. Let's keep
Absolutely.
doing this. Let's finish this book.
We're going to. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.